Hello everyone, sorry we're slightly late today. We've been dealing with a few technical issues, but we'd like to welcome you all to this WFA webinar on how to be an inclusive leader. I'm Ollie Theocharous, Head of Content for WFA, and I'll be your moderator for the next 45 to 50 minutes or so. So firstly, I want to explain how this session is going to work. As you probably guessed from our technical challenges, we are live, so we would love for you to all interact throughout. So firstly, we're going to be putting your questions to our speakers at the end of the panel. Part of this, so we would love you to ask some questions throughout, essentially. So what you should be able to see to the bottom right of your screen is a button that says questions. So if you click there, add your questions throughout the session. We will try to put as many of them as possible to our speakers before the end of the webinar. We're also going to be releasing some polls throughout the webcast. So if you want to share your opinions and see what others in the industry are thinking, do participate in these. You can find them in the poll tab, which is also at the bottom right of the screen. So to begin, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Now, one of our speakers, Doni, will be joining us shortly. She's having a few technical problems. So we're going to start by having our other speakers introduce themselves. So all of our speakers have many years experience in different parts of the sector, are from different sized businesses, and they're here today to offer their opinions to advise you all. We've got Viola Choi, who is the Vice President for Global Human Resources Agricultural Solutions at BASF SE. Doni Curkendall, Executive Vice President at the Better Meat Company, and Tanya Kotevska, General Manager at Greenagro. So it's fantastic to have you all here today. And I'm going to start by asking you all to introduce yourselves, tell us a bit about your backgrounds and the areas you work in, and also in just a few words, share with us what an inclusive leader looks like for you. So Viola, can we start with you, please? Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, for sure. Thank you very much, Ollie, for your kind introduction. So my name is Viola Choi. I'm already 7 years heading the global HR team in the Agricultural Solution Division of BASF. And I have a global team spread all over the world. It's roughly about 100 people, and also a small team here in Germany where our headquarters is located. So overall, I'm working already since 23 years in different parts of BASF. In different HR roles, but also outside of HR. I also worked for another company in another industry, but my heart beats for ag since I'm in the ag industry because it's so dynamic, so innovative, so creative, and so great people working in this industry and where you can on a daily basis learn from. So we very much focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion since several years. It's a journey. It's a continuous process, a continuous improvement. And I'm very happy to share today my experience personally, but also from my organization, and very happy to learn from the other speakers. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I think a lot of us in this industry leave for a little bit and then we always come back. Food and ag, it's the one. And Tanya, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you think it means to be an inclusive leader, please?
Well, I work for Greenagro for almost 13 years. Greenagro is a company, a very small company that from North Macedonia. We are producing premixes. This is our core business, but we are also launching new probiotics from live yeast, both for monogastric and polygastric animals this year. And we are also dealing with the pet industry. For now, we're only distributors, but we also have some other plans for that. I have started working in the company as an operational manager when the company was transitioning from a trading company to a production company, and I had a good background in an international company, so I could transfer my knowledge and help the company grow into the production company. And I have worked in basically every small sector of our small company: logistics, then sales, then marketing, then research and development. And today I'm hoping that I'm leading the company to be internationalized. For me, an inclusive leader is a leader who creates common grounds for different employees, colleagues, team members, which have different social backgrounds. They have different personalities and so on, which is not very easy to do today because we live in a very social diverse world. But I think the leader needs to transfer the vision to his or her team members that if we all have a common goal, our differences don't matter so much.
Thank you for that introduction and a really good overview of what an inclusive leader is for you. Now, Doni, I believe we've got your back now. Can you introduce yourself, please, and tell us what an inclusive leader looks like for you?
Sure. My name is Doni Curkendall. I'm Executive Vice President at the Better Meat Co. We're a small startup, only just under 4 years old, and we are making ingredients for the food system. And an inclusive leader to me is somebody who is very accessible, who is willing to listen and get to know your team members, your team, and really understand their needs. I think an inclusive leader asks more questions than they direct. And so, by really understanding the needs of your team, really understanding the way that people communicate the most effectively, and understanding, the reasons behind why people do what they do, I think is the most important and easiest way to actually be a really inclusive leader. You really just have to ask questions, and people, will share with you what they need. And you just have to be really accessible and be willing to sit there and spend the time and reach out to people. So don't wait until somebody comes to you to ask for something. Make the effort to spend time, put something on your calendar every 15, 30, minutes. Doesn't have to be very long, but as long as people have access to you, I think that that's the best way to make, inclusive decisions, really.
Fantastic. And I think that's a really good overview there. And Viola, we didn't actually get your definition of an inclusive leader. So I'm going to come back to you and say, what's that look like to you?
Thank you very much for coming back to me. I started to sweat already because I completely forgot that part, which is so important because it's the essence of our conversation today. To thank you very much to give me the opportunity. So for me, an inclusive leader is a leader who values the uniqueness, the differences of the team, and making the team being able to be themselves at work. And also a leader, an inclusive leader should create a sense of belonging to create a team identity, because the sense of belonging is a unique, or not a unique, it's a need every human being has. We all want to belong to somewhere, and it's the art is to be yourself and still be a we together and have a group identity. And with that, you inspire others. And I think how inclusive leaders can do this, I fully agree. What also you, Doni, and Tanya, you said. So it's important to have a very high self-awareness about who you are, what your personality traits are, what your triggers are, be self-reflected, but also the awareness what's going on in your team. Are there subgroups in the team? Is everyone feeling included in the team? And this requires a lot of attention, stepping back from your needs and more focusing on the needs of your team. And it takes a lot of trust to create a psychological safe environment so that everyone can feel to be themselves is possible. And with that, you create a healthy environment. And it sounds also easy, but we all know it's a journey and it's a daily effort.
It really is. It really is. And I thank you for all of your definitions there. I think awareness is going to be something we talk about a lot over the next sort of 45 minutes. So I'm really looking forward to delving a bit deeper into all of the definitions and kind of how we get there. So let's kick things off. So I know, well, as you all know, our WFA audience is incredibly broad and really features stakeholders from CEOs to those just starting out their careers in food and ag. So panel, I want to know, how do you think people at all levels of a business, regardless of whether you're top of the tree or just starting out, can help foster a culture of inclusivity? And Doni, I'm going to come to you first. Can you give us your thoughts on this, please?
I think it all starts with mentorship, and mentorship can really come from any level of an organization. I think, what's nice about certain workplaces is you find people that have been doing that for 20 years, that have decades of experience doing something. They might not be the leader of that department or, the vice president, but they have a lot of institutional knowledge that can be transferred. And so when you see somebody who's maybe new to a position, who might not have that background, I think mentorship is so important. And sometimes it's our responsibility or our duty, really, to reach out to others. We all know how awkward and hard it can be to reach out to somebody and ask them if they will be your mentor. So I think to try to make things easier for people, you have to reach out and say, hey, I've been doing this for a long time. I would love to help you or kind of, work with you so you can feel a little bit more comfortable. I think when people join an organization or a company, it's important to kind of find somebody that maybe they can talk to. They can have somebody that they feel will help them integrate into the workplace a little bit better. So I think anybody at any level of an organization can do that very easily, help people feel welcome. I recently had a 90-day check-in with a new team member, and I was so happy to hear. The first thing she told me was, I felt included in the team from the very beginning, right away. And I asked her, why? What were some of the behaviors from your team that made you feel that way? And she said, well, people started, asking me to have lunch with them. People said, hey, let me show you something that I think might be interesting for you to learn while you're here. And so it's really about other people reaching out to new team members, or maybe team members they don't really know that well, and helping them to feel included. I've also had instances where people have told me that they might be a little bit shy about sharing their thoughts, and so they can practice with somebody else. I also had another team member who came to me separately and said, hey, this person has this really good idea, but they're too shy to tell you. And they're a little bit intimidated because they don't want to sound dumb. And so it was really nice to have somebody advocate for that other person. And that way, it allowed me to then reach out to that person and say, hey, I heard that you had this really great idea. Let's talk about it. Let's just go out and take a walk and you can tell me what you're thinking. So I think advocating for each other and maybe pulling out, people's strengths and identifying that, and maybe talking to your supervisor about it, is a way that anybody in the company can help others feel more included and feel like, they can be part of the team and they can have their voices heard.
Oh, I absolutely love that. Yeah, I remember the very first job I started out of university, I didn't have anyone to go to lunch with. And the feeling you feel of, oh no, what am I going to do? No one should have to feel that. So I think that in itself is something that anyone can do. Just make sure, check in, because we know staff retention is a challenge in any industry. And if you can kind of get people feeling included and feeling comfortable early on, they're more likely to stick around and give you the best. So I think that's such a good point. Tanya, I'm going to come to you next. What do you think people can do to culture inclusivity in their organization at all levels?
Well, I think what is most important is to value also their opinion. I totally agree with everything that Doni said, and some of the things that she said I have noticed in my own company. So it's very important for them to feel that their opinion, their work is valued. For example, we had an issue with several employees coming from different, very traditional companies. They were literally just doing their tasks as soldiers. So we would say, like, do this, they would do that, and that's it. They would be afraid to alter it, to even make the task better or in any other way, just so they would not disturb the managers or whatever. So we have an anecdote that we are saying to all the new team members. The story is that in one airline company, they were trying to build a new plane, and when they tried to fly it, the wings were always breaking. And they were working day and night on that, and then the janitor just passes through and says, look, I have this idea. I don't know if it's good, but, I may share it with you. Yes, please, we're desperate. And he said, well, when I go to the bathroom, when I try to take a piece of paper, it never breaks exactly on the hole that it has. So maybe if you put holes in the wings, the wings won't break. And the engineers actually did it, and it worked. So whenever we have an employee which is insecure, We always say that story, but of course it's a process, because if people are used to working in one way, then it's very difficult. But we have in our company, we have a great example of how we had a person who was, how can I say, even in a way traumatized from the other company, and today she is the manager of the pet sector and have contributed to the company so much. But of course, we have the availability to be a small team, and then we work very closely to the team members. And also, I think it's very important to offer them trainings for personal growth, because we can work and develop our skills, but if we don't develop as people, as personalities, there is no point. And I think, as Doni said, if people are heard and valued, they will give their best and feel included, and they will not have any issues contributing to the organization and feeling good in what they're doing every day.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. And this is the thing. I think people think inclusivity is something that's like, oh, it's an afterthought. Like, it's a nice thing to have. But as both of the two of you have implied, if you have an inclusive environment, people are going to put ideas forward, which are going to save your company money, and make the company better and actually benefit everyone. So that's why it's not just a kind of diversity and inclusion box to tick. It's going to benefit everyone. And I think it's so important to remember that. And finally, Viola, can you offer your thoughts on how people can create a culture of inclusivity in their business as well, please?
Yes, thank you. I would like to come from a different angle. What could people do if they observe non-inclusive behaviors or situations? And that takes a lot of attention and awareness. So I can only encourage every employee in any kind of organization, be aware what's happening around you, use all your senses, and then what are you doing when it's happening? So one way what everyone can really do is speaking up. And speaking up also depends maybe on the situation, how comfortable you feel yourself in that situation. So it could be speaking up in that moment, speaking up that this was not okay, or this could be perceived in a non-inclusive way, so that the employee who is affected feels someone else is noticing it, that the person who is sending out maybe even an unwanted, a non-inclusive statement, that also that person is aware. And if the moment doesn't allow, because sometimes we are in situations where it's a very small, tiny moment, and for example, we had this once maybe I give an example. We were in a meeting once a while ago, and it was a virtual meeting. We were all on cameras, and sometimes you don't see all the pictures. And then someone came in as a guest speaker and said, "Welcome, gentlemen." And there were ladies in the room, maybe not on the first panel slide of the picture, but all the ladies in the room didn't feel very included by such a welcoming statement. Maybe no bad intention, but it didn't feel very inclusive in that moment. So, but the moment was so short, and then the presentation has started, so I couldn't jump in to really do something in that moment. But what I can do then later on is you can give feedback to the presenter, and you should also discuss this then in that team where it happens. So we make sure this doesn't happen the next time, or someone else jumps in. So speaking up is really powerful. So in the moment, or if it's better to do it after the moment has happened, that we really try to not just wipe it away. Oh, it was a small thing. You could also say in such a moment, come on, it was a small thing. It was not meant like this. But I think the worst moments on non-inclusiveness are this non-intended, without a bad intention, and not being aware of what has happened. And if no one brings this to the attention and to the awareness of those who haven't noticed, then the culture is much more difficult to change. So this is the one thing which came to my mind.
And it's such a good point, because I know when I go for dinner with my girlfriends, they're always saying to me, "Oh, this happened to me and I was treated like this." And those sort of things that I hear, you think to yourself, you think about those things at bad times. And that's the sort of thing that's going to make you, if someone calls you and says, "Oh, I've got another job for you," you're more inclined to go and leave the company if you've seen a number of things happen which don't necessarily fit with your beliefs and don't make you feel included. So I completely agree. I think these things have to be addressed. And I think if you can speak up, even if, as you say, it's after it's happened, you're going to make everyone feel that something that made them feel uncomfortable was addressed, and it's going to give them a better view of the overall company. So I think that's a really good point as well. I've got another question for you now. I want to pick up on an area that I personally believe has shifted in the last few years, and that is what qualities people believe a great leader has. Because we've got a lot of people who are tuning in who are already leaders, but we've got a lot of aspirational leaders who are tuning in, who want to make sure that they're getting their skill set ready for senior management opportunities. So my question for our panelists, do you think our view of what a perfect leader looks like has changed over the past 10 years? And if so, what do you believe to be the skill set of an ideal leader? So Tanya, it's your go to start. Can you give us your thoughts on this, please?
Well, first of all, I think there's no perfect leader, and this is very good to acknowledge, even in front of the team that you're leading. For me, leadership needs to be through example, not meaning that they have to have the same skills, the same personalities, the same ways of doing stuff like me, but feel comfortable in their own personalities and skills, you know. So we all have different. When I have a new employee and when I start training them, I usually say to them, look, I'm going to show you what we need to do first. Then I'm going to show you how I'm doing it. And after that, when you manage to do that, you can start doing it your own way. It doesn't have to be, you know, the same way. So this is what I think for me. It's, I mean, of course, what I think a leader should look like. This is what I needed when I had somebody leading me. Of course, leadership has changed a lot through the past 10 years because in the past, especially in the region where I live, leadership meant a leader was supposed to look somebody who is very strong, very strict, very traditional in a way. I don't know how to explain it in another way, and who doesn't ask questions, just gives orders. Today, people don't want to be ordered, and of course they should not be. Of course, we can all share the same vision. The leader usually has more experience in managing certain stuff, so he can share their vision, their background, but also they need to be sure that they want to receive feedback from the people. But even if they have less experience than them, they can certainly contribute. You know, if you're too sure of yourself, you're just losing contact with reality. And of course, as Doni said in the very beginning, you have to be there, you know. And I like that today companies have more flat flat organizations than a hierarchical one. I think this is, if you're accessible and people feel comfortable, you know, they will. You know, people have to respect you in order for them, you know, to be a good leader. And they can only respect you if you accept yourself, if you know yourself, you know. So again, I think for a leader, it's very important to work on their personal growth, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some really good points there. Viola, do you agree? Is there anything you would add to that list?
Yeah, I fully agree. And what I would like to add is where I see a shift is that leaders need to be aware and work on themselves, the team, and their impact on the organization. And what do I mean with that? So a leader must be very self-aware about the own biases, those we know they are unconscious bias, and maybe we talk later a little bit about that topic, but I'm really self-aware. What is my own identity? Who am I? And what does it mean for my team? Who am I? And what are maybe my personality traits where I can still work on myself? And what is almost like set. So we should also be true to ourselves on that one. So it's very, very important, and this continuous reflection, receiving feedback, working on this. So much more focusing on the self-development, self-awareness, to be able to, and that is now the most important, to translate this to the attention and the awareness to the team, to develop the team, show your own vulnerability, by the way, to the team. This is also how you create psychological safety, that the team can also open up. And when you also open up, your team might follow and also do the same. So this is something which really has changed. And then being aware about your impact on the organization, to also give others feedback, to be a role model. Do not just talk about inclusion and have nice buzzwords. This is what I observed over the years, what have changed, that we are much more tangible in what we are really talking about, what is really changing, what do we mean. And inclusion happens in each and every moment we interact with someone, be in writing, be it in a dialogue, being even from the body language. You can be non-inclusive or inclusive. So our impact on the organization as leaders should not underestimate it, or also the power we are having, and the power also changed how we are using it, being aware of the own power and using this in a positive sense to enable others, to give others more space, to empower others, and to create trust. So
yeah, there's some really great ones in there too, to be honest. I'm not going to say anything till the end because I'm worried I might say something that Doni's going to also come up with. So Doni, I'm coming to you now. Finally, can you share with us what you believe to be the skill set of a perfect leader? Because I think so far we've got some really good suggestions here, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Sure. I think Tanya said it, there is no perfect leader, but it doesn't mean that we can't strive to be the best leader that we can be. I think there are two things that are actionable that people can do to try to become a better leader. One is be a good problem solver. I used to think that that perfect leaders or great leaders were ones that always knew what to do. They always had the solution. They always had all the right answers. And so there really wasn't any wiggle room. Whatever decisions they make, they're making the right decision because they're the leader, right? What I have learned over the years is that that's not necessarily what makes a good leader. A good leader probably doesn't have all of the answers, but they're a good problem solver. So what a good leader is going to do is they're going to go out and collect different perspectives. They're going to collect the various information that they need to make that good decision. And a lot of the time that has to come from your team members. That has to come from the people actually doing the work that you're asking them to do. And then gathering their perspectives, gathering, the facts, and then coming up with a solution. I was when I was, a lot younger, a lot earlier in my career, I was very much, very afraid to speak up, very afraid to say my opinion. And when somebody told me to do something, I did it, Unfortunately, I think I was kind of raised, being told, just do your work harder than everybody else. And that's how you're going to prove yourself, just stay longer, be the first one there, the last one out. I will say that is kind of a habit now. So I try to always just, I enjoy my work. I enjoy being with my team members. So if people have to stay late, I want to stay late with them and, maybe provide them some support. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that it's important to really understand what people are actually doing so that you can make those best decisions, so you understand their perspective. The second part of that is actually going out. And I know in larger companies, it's really hard to go out and really do the hands-on work that everybody in your team is doing. But I think at least having chats and talking to people about what they do and their perspective about it is a really nice way that you can go out and really understand from the ground up what they're experiencing, why maybe some, there are some concerns about a certain area, a certain topic. I had also, in my previous work, I had a team of truck drivers, and I didn't really know anything about truck driving. I knew nothing about transportation, and I had to learn very quickly. I realized that the only way to really understand was to go out there and do the job with them. So I would hop into the trucks and go out and run a load and then talk to them in the meantime. I realized that a lot of the female truck drivers were really having a hard time. People still made comments about, oh, a woman truck driver, that's interesting. Are you sure you got this? Are you okay? And so I really started to understand why they were so stressed out all the time, why it was so frustrating, why they just wanted to be away from everybody else. And so it really gave me a really important perspective. And to really better understand their concerns, because by the time concerns get to leaders, you really don't get the full picture. It's kind of like that microphone, or what was that microphone game, where you start a story and then it just changes over time. I think the best way to really truly understand what people are feeling is to go out there, talk to them, try to understand. I'm not a scientist, but I work in the science field. I may not understand everything that they're telling me. Actually, most of the time I don't, but I do try to take the time to sit down and say, hey, explain this to me like a normal person, but I just want to understand what in general, this problem is. And people are happy to do that. People like to share what they're doing. People like to feel like, oh, you're interested in what I do. And so I think that's what makes a good leader, is going out, gaining the perspectives, understanding what's going on around them, being able to say, you know what, I don't know the answer to what you're asking me right now, but what I am going to go do is I'm going to go out and find out for you. I'm going to go out and try to figure that out, and I will get back to you. Let's put it on the calendar right now. Let's schedule something for next week so that we can, check in and I can provide you with that answer. I think it's okay to say, I don't know. I think a good leader is able to be humble and to say, I don't understand this yet. Let me go find out. I don't know the answer to this. And then they take the time to actually go out, figure it out, and then come back and be that problem solver that your team needs you to be.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with all three of you. I'm so glad as well you had such different perspectives, but all so important. I mean, it's, for me, very different to how it was before. When I started my career kind of 15 years ago, leaders were put on a pedestal, as you guys have said. They had to know everything. They would never apologize if they got things wrong. They would kind of style it out or blame someone. And now I think we've got a culture in the working world where, as you say, leaders are a lot more open. They listen to ideas. They're a lot more empathetic to make sure that they can support their teams and they understand what everyone is doing. I think all of that is so important. So hopefully that will only progress over time, and we'll see even more of that. And leaders won't be seen as, gods who we have to worship and listen to everything they say and we can't question them, because that is not beneficial for businesses, in my opinion. So yeah, thank you for your answers there. They were fantastic. Our next question is something that actually Viola's already alluded to, and something that I admitted in our last webinar, which is the internal biases many of us have. So for me, when it comes to hiring, I'm famed for hiring people who have a similar background to me, which is really not a good thing. So I want to know how leaders can ensure that they're being mindful of their own internal biases in the workplace, and then also holding themselves to account regarding this. So Viola, we'll start with you, please. Can you give us your thoughts on this?
Yes, for sure. I think the most important action you can take as a leader, but by the way, this applies for every human being, is first of all understanding where your biases come from, or which kind of biases to have. And there are wonderful tools out there. I'm sure a lot of you are aware about, or if not, you can also approach me. There's tools, surveys, techniques where how you can get aware of your own biases. At least those you can bring to the surface, and then you can go back to root causes even, and work on that one, and be more mindful about when you are interacting with people. This is one thing, and maybe a very important start. And the next one, I would say, what I try to practice myself, is that you question before you assume things. So we very often jump to conclusions, assumptions. I observe this in interview situations, or when in leadership team meetings, things are discussed, critical topics discussed, tensions between team members are discussed. Human beings, we tend to jump to conclusions, assumptions, because it's the easier way how to build a reality. But sometimes, or not sometimes, it is worth to really go back, ask the question: is this really how it is? Is this just my own assumption, or what makes me think things are as they are? It takes a little bit more time, and this is then a conscious effort you need to put in there to really go back and ask the questions rather than assuming. And it takes a lot of reflection. It takes a feedback culture where it's normal that we let each other know if we observe that someone in the leadership group or in the employee peer group is drawing to assumptions, that we have the culture where we can again speak up and bring this to the attention of each other. I think it's a mutual effort that we help each other also on these things, because you can do a lot for yourself, but I think we rely also on the feedback of others to help each other to form the culture we want to have in companies.
I think that's such a good point there. Doni, can you add to that? Can you share with us what I suppose, how you identify your internal biases, or what people should be doing if they believe they have them?
Yeah, I think, again, humility is such an important factor in leadership and like Viola said, in any, area of your life. Having the humility and the understanding that we're human, we are all growing up in a different way, in a different area, and with different circumstances. And just knowing that you possibly have some internal bias is, I think, a huge step. Just understanding that that's kind of the human condition, is to have internal bias, is a huge step. I do think that there are certain, again, actionable things that steps that leaders can take. For example, it kind of starts at the hiring, recruiting and hiring, for example. The more structured you have that, that process is, I think it kind of helps to at least reduce, opportunities or risks for, more bias. So I think definitely having a good structure, definitely if you're having different people interview, providing them with guidance on, here's a good structure that you can follow. And then asking more questions. Again, I think that's a great point, that you can't just make assumptions, but sometimes we do and we can't help it. So maybe waiting to react is a good way to kind of just stay back, think about what you've learned about something, or a person or anything, and taking that step back, taking the time to think about it, and then getting back to the person, or maybe then reacting to the situation at hand. Just because you don't necessarily want to react to something right away, because that's when those biases kind of come into effect. So I do think that just having that humility and that understanding that sometimes you need to take a step back and just kind of take the information in and be aware of what you might be instinctively reacting to, and how you can maybe, take that time to hold back and truly understand the situation.
Mm. It's such a good point. And with interview panels, even if you don't have a panel who can interview and a structure in place, just make sure that the person that you're interviewing with isn't the same as you. Because in the past, I've interviewed with someone, but that someone's also been quite like me, so hasn't been able to, who thinks the same as me, I suppose. So if you can bring in someone who has a different background or thinks about things differently, I think that's always really beneficial, just to kind of get through the hiring process, for sure.
Ollie,
yes.
Can I add something? Sorry for
Of
jumping
course,
in,
jump in.
because it really resonates what you, Doni, said, and I want to talk about these interview panels. I had very good experiences with diverse interview panels, where you really make sure, if you have the possibility, we also need to be aware not every organization might have the opportunity, but if you have, this is so powerful. And because you have 3-4 people, or how many are in the panel, doesn't matter, but you have different perspective on exactly the same situation. And I can tell you, this is so eye-opening. If 3 people have observed in one sentence of a candidate something completely different, and this is so eye-opening for your own reflection, but also makes the selection then better at the end. Because if you would have done this in a one-on-one situation, you just work with your own assumptions. You might, in the worst case, not be even aware. Even if you step back, that is helpful, by the way, I also agree. But if you have the opportunity, if you're selecting people, whatever your roles you're having in, I can really recommend to at least have a little panel, because it's eye-opening.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point, because if you don't know you've got internal biases, I think hearing other people's perspectives on the same candidate and the same person's answers, that might be the thing that highlights to you that actually you might need to think about things slightly differently and adjust your ways of thinking. So a very good point there. And Tanya, can you give us your thoughts on this question, please, and talk to us a bit about internal biases and how to address them?
Well, first of all, I agree with most, and not everything that Viola and Doni said. Of course, I think what is most important is to have your self-awareness. So who you are, what is your background, which is your social status, or, what, let's say, triggers you in certain ways. And I like to use a lot of humor, and especially, making humor of myself. So sometimes if I make a remark which is not okay, or, I have done something, I make fun of it, so people would understand that I have acknowledged that I have made a mistake, and I have now aware of it, and probably I will change it, but I will do it in such a, how can I say, not formal way, you know. And even if somebody else makes such a remark, you know, I usually do it the same way. But of course, I can afford this because we are a very small team. So again, I would think personal growth is better, and also personal acceptance, because if you accept yourself as you are, then you understand that other people have maybe had different experiences in their life or different backgrounds, and which made them in a certain way. Of course, nobody is wrong in the way that they're living their life, but you have more understanding of it. You know, you're more accepting of the other people, even if they're different. And of course, the common goal is what needs to bring us together, no matter our differences. This is what I think.
No, I think, again, a really, really honest answer. And I think you're absolutely right. We all make mistakes, and it's about addressing them and making sure you tackle them. I mean, yesterday, and it wasn't yesterday, day before yesterday, I was referred to as a lady. And then the person said, "Oh, am I allowed to call you that?" And I said, "Well, I don't have a problem with it, but I know that some women do." So my sister, for example, if she's ever called a lady, she calls them out immediately on it. So I think it's a little bit of that as well. Although this isn't necessarily linked to biases, it's making sure that you are educating people and communicating to people their biases. I would much rather know if I'm doing something that is questionable than everyone just stayed quiet and didn't tell me. So I agree. I think that's very fair, Tanya. So we have 2 questions left on our question list, but I think we've only got time for one because I do want to go to audience questions. So I'm going to ask you one more, panel, and that is, you're of course all women at the tops of your organizations in very senior roles. So you've really got the opportunities to influence what's going on in your businesses. So I would love to get your opinions on how organizations can offer support to ensure that not just senior leaders, but all members of staff can develop an inclusive environment to work in. Doni, it's your turn to start. So can you share your thoughts on this one, please?
Again, I have to hit on the mentorship. I just think it's so important to reach out. If you notice that maybe somebody is a little bit more shy, you know, doesn't really participate, I do think it's our duty to reach out to them and make the time to get to know them, understand maybe what is causing, you know, their shyness, or maybe what's the best way that we can help them, you know, have their voice heard. Mentorship is everything, I have to say. You know, I don't think that I would have gained the confidence that I have now in my career if it hadn't been for other people encouraging me. And it came all the way from the top. You know, my former CEO used to say to me, "Hey, there aren't enough women leaders in this field. You know, you should think about doing this, and, you know, you should think about doing that. And, you know, you should ask the company for support in doing that." And then, you know, other people in the organization would also be very motivating. I feel so lucky that I had that. And now I take it as a personal, you know, goal of mine to reach out to as many people as I can and say, "Hey, here, I noticed this about you. You know, you were really good at what you did. Why don't we talk about that and see how that can, you know, grow, or maybe you can do that as part of your duties." So I just think that it really just comes from us and from everybody in the organization being able to talk to each other, spending time learning about each other. I do find that having that access to the CEO or to, you know, the top level leaders is so crucial, because that's the best way you're really going to get to know people. And again, it doesn't have to be a long meeting, but just having that access to your leader is really, I think, very encouraging for people at all levels of the organization to feel like they can have an opportunity to show who they are, to at least express their perspective and make an impact on the company. And so I just think that just has to come from everybody, and we have to encourage our leaders. You know, if you are the CEO or the VP and you have, you know, supervising leaders underneath you, that's some training that you can give to them. You know, how to have effective one-on-ones. How do you gain trust? You know, how do you try to understand your people's perspective a little bit better? And just having that opportunity. I also think small things like team lunches and, maybe getting breakfast for everybody, spending a little bit of time together kind of helps put people on an equal playing field where you don't really see those, it's not a meeting where somebody is leading the meeting, it's just an opportunity for people to all feel the same, at least for, a temporary amount of time and really get to know each other. So the more, time you spend trying to get to know people, I think the better the environment will be in fostering inclusivity and celebrating diversity.
I think there's some really good points in there. And of course, if you are a little bit shy, you don't want to ask anyone within your business to be your mentor, WFA run a mentorship scheme. It's supported by Alltech. It's completely free. And we're reopening applications for our second cohort this year in a few weeks. So take opportunities and try and get on board with that if you can't find someone internally who you feel is going to help you out there. But thank you for that, Doni. I completely agree on all of that, but particularly the mentorship side. We're a really big advocate of that here. Tanya, how do you think organisations can make sure leaders and staff are developing an inclusive work environment?
Well, as Doni said, I think small social and informal gatherings are very important, because in that way we can all get to each other better. And despite our differences, I'm certain that sometimes we have some things in common. And mentorship is also very important. But for example, in our company, we don't always have the time and the possibilities because we're a small team. But knowing that other colleagues are here for you, so sometimes I would make a situation where I see that one colleague is overloaded and then ask the other colleague to help them and fill in. And of course, they learn how to give the favor back and so on. So they somehow start working together and helping each other, in a way. But I think also from my experience, what worked for us are the trainings on personal growth, leading through good example, and definitely social gatherings. So we can understand, because these are informal, we talk about each other, about our lives, and we can see that, okay, you're different from me, but you're a good person at the end, and we have a common goal. We want to work for the same company, we both want better salaries, so, sure, we can work together, and this is what worked for us, for example.
Fantastic. Some really good points there as well. It's not a one-size-fits-all, I think, for this, because as we know, even amongst this group, we've got some absolutely huge organisations and some much smaller organisations. So it is a case, as you kind of both described there, you've got to see what works for your business in terms of kind of making sure that you're inclusive, and it is going to be different for everyone. So thank you for those opinions there. And finally, Viola, of course, you work for a large organisation. So can you give us your thoughts on what huge organizations with thousands of staff can do to address this, please?
Yeah, and hopefully whatever I say also it gives some inspiration to no matter what size companies, because it's applicable everywhere. I find this quite important. So I would say, first of all, it's very important that the employees feel every day that there's a clear commitment from all leaders, from the top of the company to all leaders, that this is really essential to the way how we work together. I don't want to use the word culture because it's always such a big word, and some employees feel scared by this big word. And so this is the way how we are working. It must be really very clear, and not just by words and commitments spoken out. It starts with that. So that's very clear. That's what we want to be, but maybe we are not there yet. So that needs to be also acknowledged. We need to be honest here with ourselves. And then it's the most important that the leaders really translate this or carry this into the very tangible day-to-day actions. And even if it's the smallest thing we do differently, let people speak out in the meeting, listen to each other. Also, what you said, then also showing care to employees. And Tanya, you also mentioned it, gathering social interactions where we truly show people you matter to us as leaders, to us in the team, to us as a company, and we listen to you. You're an important member, and when we value your uniqueness, and we are all unique, and this is what we have in common at the end. So what I want to say is really bringing it down from this high level, especially in a corporate world, but maybe also in a smaller company context, to bring it down from these nice words, which are important, to be spoken out, but then really do something, action, and because the people will only feel included by actions, by truly living it, not keeping it on this commitment level. This is quite important.
It's very true. I mean, in our annual survey, we ask every year, do you know if your company's got a D&I policy? Do you read your D&I policy? And people don't, but they do see a manager saying, okay, the entire company or the entire team, we're going to go out for breakfast and we're going to just have a chat off the, personally, so we can all get to know each other better, or we're going to do something that is going to benefit the team. So you're right, action is so important in this instance. So that's a very good point that I think everyone needs to take on board. It's important to have those policies and everything written down, but what are your team going to see? What's going to really make them feel included? We did have another question, but I'm going to go straight to our audience questions because we've had quite a few come in and I want to get your thoughts on them. So one at the top here, what have you done to be an inclusive leader in a work from home situation? Now, I love this question because we're all dealing with it and we all have been dealing with it. So does someone want to give their thoughts on how to be inclusive when we can't all be together in one place?
I can start.
Go for it.
I found it much more difficult personally because the calendar was so full, because we had much more meetings than before, and everything became so got so formalized in these meetings. So what I try to do together with my team, but also in individual situations, first of all, create moments which are not formal, but they are informal, coffee chats, coffee breaks, and then also trying to attend as a leader, because sometimes you're so busy, but then it's important you seriously try to attend, but also give the opportunity to your team, even without you, to be together, to have these gatherings, even in a virtual environment, have Christmas parties virtually, to have a close contact with each other. And then on a one-on-one situation, it's very important to reach out, spend time really to reach out to people, even train your senses on the camera, that you can read body language in a different way and the camera, and ask more questions also here. How are you doing? So we started our meetings, no matter if in the group or individually, how are we all doing? What's going on? This is something how we learned and adjusted and over time, but I found it personally much more difficult. But over the time, talking also about this with peers and with the teams also about their needs, about their perception, that really helped to be better over the time.
It is very challenging. I remember over lockdown, there was someone who didn't have their camera on, who normally has their camera on. I sent her a little message to be like, are you okay? And she was going through a tough time. But of course, I'd have known if we were in the office, because it would have been very clear. But if someone's not got a camera on, it's so difficult to tell and to make them feel better and comfortable when they're in that situation. So I completely agree. It's a challenge, but learning about how different people react when working from home can maybe help you do so. Any other thoughts on that question, or shall I move on?
For example, I can just give an example of how I did it during the pandemic. Of course, we had Zoom meetings, and but in order for us to keep us together as a team, we made groups on WhatsApp. So every morning somebody would send a joke, just to put a start for the day, so we can, all communicate. And it would be easier for us to communicate, because no matter how much we have communication skills in that kind of situation where you're alone at home for many hours and days, you lose those skills, or they somehow are put aside. So that's how we did it for us. This was our example.
Tanya, I love that you seem to have a lot of fun at work. I find this so important, that we don't, with all the seriousness and challenges and daily workloads, we don't lose the fun at work. I like this.
But we spend more than 8 hours together. So this is the time that I spend more with my colleagues than with first for myself, and then of course for my colleagues. I want that place to be enjoyable, and for us to be comfortable with each other. Otherwise, firstly, I lose, and then my colleagues as well, and nobody's happy. So, this was my idea, when, because I used to be very stiff, really, honestly. I was stiff, and I thought that I should share personal things with my colleagues and so on. But, I saw that, in the company is not growing as much. And as soon as I, put my guards down, we started working much better, and we had very good growth those years that we were, more interacting more socially.
I bring it back to staff retention. You want to keep your staff as long as possible in your business, because if you lose them, then that's going to be, you're losing skills, you're losing knowledge. And if people like working somewhere, then they're likely to leave. It's a lot harder to hand in your notice if you really like all your colleagues and you really like your job. We've got basically no time, but I do want to ask one more question. So short answer if anyone's got it. There are two linked questions here. One is, there's a growing awareness of neurodivergent talent in the workforce. Are your organizations starting to discuss this topic? And linked to that in some ways is, how do you deal with team members who don't like enforced social interaction? So of course, neurodivergent can be quite broad, but some of that does include the social interaction side of things. Is there anything that we can do about that? Just a quick answer if anyone's got some thoughts.
I have an experience, a small experience. Actually, I'm the one that whose brain is working differently than the others. I'm not a really morning person, and I really have an issue with that. So I really focus hard in the mornings. On the other hand, my colleagues, most of my colleagues, not all of them luckily, work much better in the mornings. So we came to a deal. I work sometimes in the evening. I'm more focused. My phone doesn't ring so much. Of course, I cannot call them at any time. So we made up a system where I write emails in the evening and they read them in the morning, and we discuss them at noon. So if you explain yourself, or if you ask the person who sees a bit different, and then talk to them, then I think you can all find a way. Of course, there is no perfect model, but you should address that as a team and find a solution. I also had another example where we employed a girl who was, let's say, more artistic, but was bringing a lot of benefit to the business. And the other team members were kind of, she was not really social. She didn't want to socially interact with them so much. So of course, it takes time. We made a team. We made a team meeting. I explained to each of them personally that we are different and so on. We are going to do a team building, and I think these ways, at least for us, they worked. So this was our example.
I think it's a great example. You've got to find out what's going to work for everyone and have that conversation. Be really open. Find out what they need. I would love to get everyone else's thoughts, but we're already completely out of time. So we've come to the end. As always, we're probably going to run over a little bit. So thank you all of the attendees for tuning in. I do want to take a moment to thank our amazing speakers today. We've had Viola, Doni and Tanya. It's been so great to get your thoughts on this subject. And I really hope that current leaders and aspiring leaders have picked up some advice about how to be even better in your roles. It's been such a fabulous discussion. And thank you all for taking part today. We're running out of time and we're out of time, but I do want to say just a quick announcement. If you want even more advice and content from women in food and agriculture, we have the speakers and agenda for the WFA Summit, which is taking part in Frankfurt in June online. You can check it out at wfasummit.com. And it's an incredible place where we'll be talking about all the things we've talked about today: mentorship, inclusive leadership, leadership skills. So if you are able to join us in June, we'd love to see you there. Finally, a big thank you, as I said, to everyone for joining us and contributing. We hope you have a fantastic day and you join us for future sessions from WFA. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.